So I'm doing something a bit different this time, something I've never done before, and something that I honestly never thought I would do. So please just bear with me while I somewhat blindly traipse through the melodious world of music and review an album. I bet you'll never guess which band I'm doing. Given the proximity to the 30th anniversary of John Lennon's death, it seems rather timely to break out the old Rubber Soul. Personally, I feel that this is somewhat of an underrated album. Or, well, underrated for a Beatles album. While it's extremely well regarded, it's not always mentioned in the same breath as, say, Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road. And while my personal top spot of their catalog would probably be its successor, Revolver, Rubber Soul is indeed a landmark achievement in their career. See, while Sgt. Pepper seems like a pinnacle of concept and execution, it took a few steps to get there. Revolver contributed greatly to the psychedelic and experimental rock aspects, but Rubber Soul was probably the first step in that direction. It did innovate quite a bit, but it was more of a maturation of the form they'd been building up to that point. See, at this point they were still
those four fresh-faced Liverpudlian mop-tops
they were when they first started out. As you can see, no facial hair, and still in that stage where, when I was little, I had a hard time telling them apart. They hadn't quite abandoned touring yet, but they were starting to work on playback trickery. And if you listen to those three albums in succession, Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper, it's not hard to trace the evolution. Those are some introspective, stoic-looking Beatles, with just a hint of mischief. And it was actually the band's own idea to distort the aspect ratio to cause them to appear stretched out and unnatural. See, when the Beatles do it, it's cool and innovative. But when you people do it with your televisions, it's stupid and wrong, and I die a little inside. Before I go any further, I should make it clear that I am reviewing the original British configuration of this album, not the Capitol Records American version. Through Revolver, all the group's albums were reconfigured and shortened. And in this case, it was done to align the already acoustically inclined album more with folk rock, which was popular at the time. Oh, and as is common with Beatles analysis, all songs are Lennon-McCartney compositions unless otherwise noted. Selection number 1 is Drive My Car. A peppy rock tune, it gets the album off to an upbeat start, but the fact that its main subject is only very thinly veiled euphemism for sexual favors, it starts us off with a bit of an edge, too. Similar to She Was Just 17, you know what I mean. I can't help thinking of that fact when I remember that Squeaky Clean Full House once used a cover of this song in one of their episodes, and I admit that humors me a little. Next up is a complete 180 with Norwegian Wood of This Bird Has Flown. Primarily a Lennon composition, he admits it was his way of safely writing about an affair. So safely that his wife could be in the room while he was writing it. Way to keep it classy, John! But this is one of my favorite songs on this album. The lyrics are very tactile in nature, so I always get a clear image of, say, the wood paneling, the tub, the fire. It's mostly acoustic guitar, but this song is also notable for bringing in George Harrison's burgeoning interest in the sitar. The next two albums would each feature a Harrison-composed, Eastern-inspired sitar piece, so it's interesting that its big introduction is in a number not written by him and in a different type of song. But its inclusion adds a bit of spice to this number. Song number 3 is You Won't See Me, Paul McCartney's expression of dissatisfaction with his then-girlfriend Jane Asher, and it seems to stand out due to its biting lyrics juxtaposed against a relatively upbeat instrumentation. It's depressing, but it's darn catchy. Next up is Nowhere Man, reported to be one of the first Beatles songs that has nothing to do with love, dating, breakups, or one-night stands, which in itself is a huge milestone. Instead, this is an introspective piece by Lennon about himself to himself. But this song opened the gates to more songs about more diverse topics, just like our next song. 5 and 6 are Think For Yourself and The Word. Stuck in the middle of the first side of the album, I can't help feeling these two go together, despite being quite different. The former is a Harrison piece, probably one of his first sort of social commentary songs, similar to his later efforts in Taxman and Piggies. The opening guitar riffs that are reprised throughout the song are really rough, indicative of serious warning or just biting sardonicism, and I also really love the harmonies in it. The Word also has good harmonies, but it's about love. It's nothing special, but it's not that bad either. The end of side 1 is Michel, a French-inspired piece spearheaded by McCartney. Its lyrics aren't anything terribly engaging, especially when you realize it's mostly just the same phrase endlessly repeated in English and French. But its melancholic melody is simultaneously haunting and beautiful. It's one of my favorites, and it's actually very personal to me. The beginning of side 2 lifts the energy a bit with What Goes On, one of the few songs in the entire catalog to get a Richard Starkey credit, alongside Lennon and McCartney. While Ringo claims he actually contributed very little to the creation of this song, he does sing lead vocals, and the country-inspired bend seems right up his alley.
Yeah.
To me, country music is generally comparable to having razor blades massage my eardrums, but when Ringo does it, it's really not that bad. The second song on side 2 is a generically titled Girl. And no, not the one that Davy Jones would later sing on the Brady Bunch. A downbeat love song, it doesn't particularly stand out from the rest of the songs on the album, except for its use of the word tit, quickly repeated as background filler. Hear that? So yeah, good song. Moving on. I'm Looking Through You is basically the echo to You Won't See Me. It's the same bitter premise, although this one's a little bit more downbeat. I'm not quite as fond of it as I am of its predecessor, but it does manage to stand out with its usage of the Hammond organ. If I'm Looking Through You corresponds to You Won't See Me, then In My Life matches up with Nowhere Man. It's another Lennon introspection, but I much prefer this one. It's very melancholy and its lyrics evoke some good imagery. I particularly like the Baroque piano break near the end. That was actually played by producer George Martin and then manipulated through playback speeds to sound more like a harpsichord. So yeah, an early bit of recording trickery that the Beatles would later refine to great effect. 5 and 6 once again seem to go together as a pair, this time with Wait and If I Needed Someone. Wait is basically the word. It's another love song. Not much to say other than it was basically a time filler. It had been left off of Help and revisited here because they needed one more track. It's standard but good, and a nice anchor to the earlier styles they'd soon be leaving behind. If I Needed Someone is the other Harrison composition on his album. Another love song, it stands out quite a bit for me for its distinctive use of Mixolydian scale, minor shift, and some wonderful harmonies. And finally we close up with Run For Your Life, which wins my award hands down for having fun with domestic abuse. Its message is basically, cheat on me and I'll kill you. Which is kind of weird considering that whole Norwegian wood thing earlier. Now before you say this song is misogynistic, Nancy Sinatra later covered it in a gender-swapped version, so it's equal opportunity beating around here. Lennon would later go on to say that this is his least favorite Beatles song, but it does end our album in much the same way it opened, upbeat with a bit of sexual immorality. This is a very well constructed album. There are a couple of songs I would classify as filler, but it's quite amazing how well everything fits together. As you notice, songs seem to pair up quite easily, at least in my mind, and the two sides of the album seem to be close to mirror versions of one another in terms of tone and layout. You also probably noticed it was the slower and more melancholy songs I seem to like. Well, this album feels rather melancholy to me, and I like that. And it also fits. With more sophistication, the Beatles were leaving behind simplistic emotions and latching on to greater accomplishments. But they were also beginning to leave behind their own classic era. And for that, a somewhat mixed emotions album was probably more appropriate than they themselves realized.
All you eat is lunch. All you drink is punch. You don't have time to munch.